What happens when Hollywood's toughest actor walks into the lion's den of daytime television and completely dismantles one of its most outspoken hosts? Today, we dive into the explosive confrontation that left Joy Behar so humiliated she walked away from The View forever. This wasn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. It was the moment Tom Hardy's razor-sharp wit met Joy's relentless interruptions, and the results were devastating. Before we dive in, make sure to hit subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments about celebrities who can't handle being challenged. The studio lights blazed hot that Tuesday morning as Tom Hardy settled into the familiar guest chair of The View. Known for his intense performances in films like Mad Max and The Dark Knight Rises, Hardy had agreed to appear to promote his latest project, and nobody expected this routine promotional appearance to turn into television history. Joy Behar, sitting in her usual spot, had that familiar glint in her eye regular viewers knew all too well. She had been digging into Hardy's past interviews and controversial quotes, preparing what she thought would be another signature takedown session. The other hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and the rest of the panel, sensed the tension building even before the cameras rolled. Joy began with the condescending smile she reserved for guests she planned to interrogate. "Let's talk about your comments regarding method acting. You've said some intense things about how far actors should go for their craft. Don't you think that's just a fancy way of saying actors should be allowed to behave badly?" Hardy leaned back slightly, his piercing blue eyes studying Joy with the same intensity he brought to his most demanding roles. There was a pause, long enough for everyone in the studio to hold their breath, before he responded in his distinctive gravelly voice. "Well, Joy, I think there's a difference between commitment to craft and behaving badly, though I suspect you might not see the distinction. Method acting requires discipline, research, and respect for the process. It's not about throwing tantrums or making excuses for poor behavior, which seems to be what you're implying." The other hosts exchanged glances. This wasn't the usual celebrity softball interview. Hardy had politely but firmly pushed back against Joy's loaded question, and the atmosphere in the studio shifted. Joy's smile faltered for a moment before she doubled down, her voice taking on the sharp edge that made her famous for confrontational interviews. "Oh, please, Tom. We've all heard stories about actors who claim they're in character when they're really just being difficult. Surely you can admit some of this method acting stuff is pretentious nonsense." "Pretentious nonsense," Hardy repeated slowly, each word deliberate and cutting. "That's an interesting perspective from someone who's made a career out of offering opinions on subjects they've never actually experienced. Tell me, Joy, what's your background in performance? What gives you the authority to dismiss techniques actors have used successfully for decades?" The studio fell silent except for the low hum of the cameras. Joy's face flushed red, clearly not expecting to be questioned about her own credentials. She was used to asking the tough questions, not defending her positions. "I've been in this business for over 20 years, she shot back, her voice rising slightly. "I think I know a thing or two about what's real and what's just actors being self-indulgent." "20 years of what exactly?" Hardy asked with genuine curiosity, making the question sting even more. 20 years of sitting behind a desk offering commentary, because unless I'm mistaken, your performance experience is rather limited, isn't it? You've done some comedy, some hosting, but you've never had to transform yourself completely for a role, have you?" Whoopi tried to step in, sensing the tension. "Now, let's not—" But Joy cut her off, pride wounded. "I don't need to have climbed Mount Everest to know it's tall, Tom, and I don't need to be a method actor to recognize when someone's using it as an excuse." Hardy's expression remained calm, but there was something almost predatory in his composure now, like a chess master who had just seen his opponent make a fatal error. "That's actually a perfect analogy, Joy. You're right that you don't need to climb Everest to know it's tall, but you would need to be a climber to critique climbing techniques, wouldn't you?" You'd need to understand rope work, oxygen systems, weather patterns. You'd need real expertise, not just opinions. Are you saying I'm not qualified to have opinions? Joy demanded, her voice clearly agitated. Not at all, Hardy replied smoothly. You're absolutely qualified to have opinions, but there's a difference between having an opinion and making authoritative statements about professional practices you've never engaged in. Surely someone with your experience in media understands that distinction. The other hosts were visibly uncomfortable. Sarah Haynes fidgeted with her cards, and Whoopi gave the producers desperate looks off camera. The interview had gone completely off script, and Joy was clearly losing control. You know what, Tom? Joy said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. I think you're proving my point perfectly. All this intellectual posturing, this need to sound so serious and important. That's exactly what I mean when I say method acting is pretentious. Hardy tilted his head slightly and for the first time smiled. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who had just been handed exactly the opening they needed. Intellectual posturing, he said quietly. Joy, I've answered your questions directly and honestly. I've engaged with your criticisms thoughtfully. If that strikes you as pretentious, I think that says more about your comfort level with substantive conversation than it does about my character. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. Joy's mouth opened and closed, clearly searching for a comeback. But for perhaps the first time in her television career, she seemed genuinely speechless. Hardy continued calmly. You asked me about method acting, and I explained it. You challenged my explanation. I questioned your expertise to make that challenge. You called my response pretentious. And now I'm pointing out that dismissing thoughtful dialogue as pretentious might say something about your own limitations. At what point in this conversation have I been anything other than respectful and direct? The camera operators captured every moment of Joy's visible discomfort. Her usual confidence had evaporated, replaced by the look of someone who had started a fight they were rapidly losing. This is ridiculous, Joy muttered, flustered. I'm trying to have a normal conversation here. Are you? Hardy asked, raising an eyebrow. Because from where I sit, it seems like you came in with a predetermined narrative. You wanted to paint method acting as pretentious nonsense, and when I offered a different perspective, you dismissed it without engaging with the substance. That's not a conversation, Joy. That's a lecture where you've decided the conclusion in advance. The silence stretched. Joy's face went through several shades of red as she scrambled internally for a way to regain control. The other hosts looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. Look, I think we're getting a bit off track here, Whoopi finally interjected. Actually, I think we're exactly on track, Hardy said, briefly acknowledging Whoopi before returning his focus to Joy. Joy asked me about method acting, presumably to discuss it. I'm simply trying to understand why she seemed so hostile to the concept without any practical experience with it. Joy's jaw tightened. She wasn't used to being analyzed on her own show, and her discomfort became increasingly obvious. I'm not hostile to anything. I just think some actors use method acting as an excuse to be difficult on set. Some actors probably do, Hardy agreed calmly. Just like some talk show hosts probably use their platform to attack people they disagree with, instead of having genuine discussions. Should we judge all talk show hosts by the worst examples? The comparison hit like a sledgehammer. Joy's eyes widened. For a moment, she looked genuinely shocked that someone had used her own logic against her so effectively. That's completely different, she protested. But her voice lacked conviction. Is it, though? Hardy asked, genuinely curious. You're saying we should judge method acting by its worst practitioners? I'm suggesting we could judge talk show hosting by its worst. Practitioners. What makes one valid and the other off limits? Sarah Haynes tried to jump in. Maybe we could talk about your new project. But Joy cut her off again. unable to let Hardy's challenge go unanswered. "You're twisting my words, Tom. I never said we should judge all method actors by the bad ones." Hardy remained patient, his tone almost educational, like a professor correcting a student who hadn't done the reading. "Actually, Joy, your exact words were that method acting is pretentious nonsense, and that actors use it as an excuse to behave badly. That sounds like a pretty broad generalization to me. Would you like me to have the producers replay the tape?" The offer to replay her own words rattled Joy even more. She shifted uncomfortably, realizing every word of this conversation was being recorded for millions to see. "I think you're being deliberately obtuse," Joy said, defensive. "Obtuse?" Hardy repeated, a hint of amusement in his voice. "Joy, I've been nothing but direct. You made claims about method acting. I questioned those claims. You attacked my questions as pretentious, and I pointed out that dismissing legitimate discussion as pretentious might reflect poorly on the person doing the dismissing. Which part of that strikes you as obtuse?" Joy was spiraling. Her usual arsenal of interruptions, topic changes, and personal attacks wasn't working against someone who refused to be derailed and followed each line of reasoning to its logical conclusion. "You're playing word games?" she accused, though even as she said it, she knew how weak it sounded. "Joy," Hardy said, eyebrows raised, "words are how we communicate ideas. If you're not comfortable with precise language, perhaps television isn't the right medium for you." The suggestion that Joy might not be suited for television, delivered in Hardy's matter-of-fact tone, was devastating. The other hosts audibly gasped, and the production team off-camera frantically gestured to each other. Joy's face went pale, then flushed an even deeper red. "How dare you suggest that I don't belong in television? I've been successful in this industry longer than you've been acting." "Have you, though?" Hardy asked. The simple question carried more weight than any lengthy accusation. "I mean, what exactly do you consider success? Because from what I can see, your approach to interviewing seems designed to generate conflict rather than insight. You ask loaded questions, interrupt guests when they try to answer thoughtfully, and then attack them when they don't respond the way you want. Is that really success, or just noise?" The accuracy of Hardy's assessment was undeniable. Everyone watching could see that he had described Joy's interview style with surgical precision, and by refusing to be interrupted or derailed, he demonstrated his point in real time. "I ask tough questions because that's what journalists do," Joy shot back, her voice shaking. "Journalists?" Hardy repeated calmly, the word carrying enormous weight. "Joy, when did you last break a story? When did you last do investigative reporting? When did you last do anything other than offer opinions about other people's work? Because what I'm seeing isn't journalism. It's someone who's built a career on being argumentative, trying to pick a fight with someone who won't play along." The distinction between journalism and opinion punditry was crystal clear, and Hardy had just highlighted that Joy was firmly in the latter category while claiming the credibility of the former. Whoopi made another attempt to save the situation. "Tom, maybe we should—" But Joy was past the point of being saved. Her pride was wounded, her professional competence questioned, and she faced the humiliating realization that she was losing an argument on her own show in front of millions of viewers. "You know what?" Joy said, her voice rising. "I don't have to sit here and be lectured by some actor who thinks he's smarter than everyone else." "Actually," Hardy said quietly, "you do have to sit there. This is your show. I'm your guest. You invited me here presumably to discuss my work. And now you're upset that I'm not playing the role you wrote for me in your head. But here's the thing, Joy. I'm not performing for you. This is a conversation between two adults. And if you can't handle that, maybe the problem isn't with me." The words hit like a final blow. Joy sat frozen, processing that she had just been completely outmaneuvered by someone who had never raised his voice, never been disrespectful, and had treated her like a professional, even while systematically dismantling her credibility. "This is unbelievable," she whispered, more to herself than anyone else. "What's unbelievable?" Hardy asked. "That someone disagreed with you. That someone asked you to defend your positions instead of just accepting them. That someone treated your questions seriously enough to give honest answers instead of promotional sound bites. Which part exactly is unbelievable to you?" Joy's mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. A stark contrast for someone who had built a career on always having something to say. The silence was deafening. Hardy leaned forward slightly, his voice almost gentle. "Joy, I came here to talk about my work. You decided to turn it into an attack on method acting, presumably because you thought it would make good television. But when I engaged with your criticism seriously, you got upset. The question you need to ask yourself is this: do you actually want to have conversations, or do you just want to perform anger for ratings?" The question hung in the air like a challenge that couldn't be ignored. Joy stared at Hardy, her breathing shallow, struggling with the realization that she had no good answer. The "perform anger for ratings" comment cut right to the heart of everything she had built her career on. "That's not," she started, then stopped. "I don't perform anything. I give my honest opinions." "Do you, though?" Hardy asked, his tone almost sympathetic, which somehow made it worse for Joy. "Because it seems to me you came into this conversation with a script. Attack method acting, get me defensive, create drama for the highlight reels. But when I didn't follow your script, when I actually engaged with your questions seriously, you got frustrated. That suggests the conversation itself was never the point." Joy's hands were visibly shaking. She looked around at her co-hosts, hoping for backup, but they were all avoiding eye contact. Even Whoopi, usually quick to defend her colleagues, seemed focused entirely on her notes. "I ask the questions that viewers want answered," Joy said, her voice wavering. "Do they, though?" Hardy pressed gently. "Do viewers really want to watch you attack guests, or do you just assume they do because conflict gets ratings? Because from where I sit, this doesn't feel like journalism or entertainment. It feels like bullying." The word bullying hit Joy like a physical blow. Her face went pale, and for a moment, she looked genuinely stunned. No one had ever called her a bully on television before, and the accuracy of it was devastating. "I am not a bully," she whispered, though even she didn't sound convinced. "Aren't you?" Hardy asked. "You use your platform to attack people who can't really fight back without looking bad. You interrupt them when they try to explain themselves. You dismiss their responses without listening. You make personal attacks when your arguments fall apart. What would you call that behavior if you saw it anywhere else?" Joy's breathing quickened. She was clearly panicking as the full weight of Hardy's assessment sank in. Everything he was saying was true, and she knew it. Worse, millions of people were watching her realize it in real time. "This is my show," she said desperately. "I have a right to ask tough questions." "Absolutely," Hardy agreed immediately. "You have every right to ask tough questions, but I also have the right to give tough answers, and your guests have the right to be treated with basic respect, even when you disagree with them." The problem isn't that you ask hard questions, Joy. The problem is that you seem to think asking hard questions means you shouldn't have to answer any. Sarah Haynes made one last attempt to intervene. "Maybe we should take a commercial break." But Joy was beyond saving now. Something had broken inside her, the carefully constructed wall between her public persona and private self-doubt crumbling. "No," she said, her voice cracking. "No, I want to finish this. You think you're so smart, so superior? But you don't know anything about what it's like to work in this industry as a woman. You don't know what I've had to do to survive." Hardy's expression softened genuinely for the first time since the conversation began. "You're absolutely right. I don't know what that's like. And I'm not trying to dismiss the real challenges you've faced. But Joy, none of that justifies treating people badly. Being a woman in a tough industry is a reason to fight for better standards, not an excuse to abandon them." The compassion in his voice seemed to break something in Joy completely. Tears formed in her eyes, and her professional mask slipped entirely. "You don't understand," she said, tired and defeated. "If I'm not the tough one, if I'm not the one asking the hard questions, then what am I? What's my value?" "That's exactly the wrong question," Hardy said gently. "Your value isn't in being tough, mean, or confrontational. Your value is in being curious, in helping people understand complex issues, in creating space for genuine dialogue. But you can't do any of that if you're more interested in performing conflict than having conversations." Joy was crying openly now, the cameras capturing every moment. The other hosts looked mortified, realizing they were witnessing the complete breakdown of their colleague's professional identity on live television. "I can't do this anymore," Joy said suddenly, standing from the table. "I can't sit here and pretend this is working when it's not. Tom, you're right about all of it, and I hate that you're right, and I hate that you've made me see it, and I hate that I've built my whole career on being something that I'm apparently not very good at." The studio was silent except for the sound of Joy removing her microphone. Hardy started to stand, but Joy held up her hand. "Don't," she said. "Don't try to make this better. Don't try to be nice about it. You came here to promote your work, and instead you've shown me, and everyone watching, exactly who I really am. And the worst part is, you did it without being cruel. You did it by just refusing to play along with my game." She turned to face the camera directly, her makeup streaked with tears, but her voice steadier than it had been all morning. "You know what, viewers? Tom's right. I've been performing anger for ratings. I've been treating guests like props in my personal drama instead of as human beings with something valuable to say. And I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being the person who attacks people for having thoughtful responses to legitimate questions." Hardy remained standing, torn between wanting to comfort her and respecting her space. "Joy, you don't have to—" "Yes, I do," she interrupted, "because this is the first honest conversation I've had on this show in years, and it took a guest calling me out to make it happen. That's not journalism. That's not even good television. That's just sad." She looked around at her co-hosts, then back at the camera. "I built my career on being the tough questioner, the one who wouldn't let anyone get away with anything. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that the point of asking tough questions is to get good answers, not just create drama. And Tom just spent the last 20 minutes showing me what that actually looks like." Whoopi finally found her voice. "Joy, maybe we should discuss this off camera." "No, Whoopi. I'm done discussing things off camera. I'm done with the performance. I'm done pretending that being confrontational is the same as being brave." Joy turned back to Hardy. "Thank you for showing me what I've become. I don't like it, but I needed to see it." Hardy nodded respectfully. For what it's worth, recognizing it is the first step toward changing it. "Maybe," Joy said, "but I can't change it here. Not in this format. Not with these expectations. Not with this version of myself that everyone expects to see. I need to figure out who I actually want to be before I can be that person on television." With that, she walked off the set, leaving her co-hosts, her guest, and millions of viewers in stunned silence. Hardy slowly sat back down, genuinely shaken by what had just happened. "Well," Whoopi said finally, struggling to process what she had witnessed, "I guess we should go to commercial." As the cameras stopped rolling, Hardy sat quietly for a moment, then looked directly at the remaining hosts. "I hope she's okay," he said simply. "That took real courage." And that's how one of television's most confrontational personalities walked away from her career, not brought down by scandal or controversy, but by someone who simply refused to let her avoid the consequences of her own questions. Sometimes the most devastating thing you can do to someone who built their career on performing anger is to treat them with the respect and honesty they've forgotten how to handle. What do you think? Did Joy deserve what happened to her? Or should guests just play along with the show's format? Let me know in the comments below.